It seems fitting that I'm reviewing this at the height of the summer, and it's super hot, super sticky. So if you see like a sheen on me, a glimmer, a sparkle, it's not because I'm a vampire. It's because I'm sweating my balls off. So let's dive into this one.
Ett andetag just här och nu.
Sommargryningsljus. Nope, still didn't get it with that one. By Kaipa. So, Kaipa is a Swedish symphonic retro prog band, forming in like the early 70s, and then kind of disbanding in the early 80s. They put out 5 albums in this time, but for me, it was when they returned to the stage in 2002 with Notes from the Past. I think this is where most people like really gravitated to their music, and I fell in love with them at this point. I got, the 1-2 punch of Notes from the Past and Keyholder at that point. From there, I think that their output has been kind of shaky, like kind of following suit within the Swedish retro prog in the same vein as like the Flower Kings. What kind of sets these guys apart is their use of female vocalists. They have this very signature guitar and keyboard sound that they like to play with. And for me, I think they reached their pinnacle with their 2010 album In the Wake of Evolution. Not saying that Mind Revolutions and Angler Feelings aren't great. It's just those ones I feel are a little bit lacking, and the subsequent albums from there are kind of a little bit of a mixed grab bag when it comes to quality. Vitjar in 2012, Steigen in 2014, they were fine and actually have some really interesting and really powerful notes on those. But Children of the Sound and Jursgog from 2017 and 2022, they were a little bit lackluster. I didn't really feel too much about it. I just felt like they were wandering the landscape. They didn't really add anything new to the sound or to the presentation that they were playing with. And I didn't really feel any of the build-ups or payoffs that these guys are really able to construct, because that is one thing that keeps me coming back to Kaipa, is their ability to create these really elaborate soundscapes, these really beautiful build-ups and payoffs. And I just really didn't feel any of that. So it was for that reason that I wasn't all that excited for this current album. And yeah, it's a little bit of a shame, because as I mentioned, they've put out some of my favorite retro prog, Notes from the Past, In the Wake of Evolution, Keyholder. These are all staples of the retro prog scene. So yeah, now we're coming into this one, their 15th studio record. And I want to get right off the get-go the things that I felt were lackluster, that were lacking, or that I wish that they would improve upon. The first one is the length. I mean, I feel like I'm just a broken record going over and over and over again. With the single edit of the title track on this record, we're looking at about 80 minutes worth of music. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I feel as if they could trim this down a little bit, make it a little bit more punchy, a little bit more snappy. We'd have something a little bit more digestible on our hands, because as it's being presented, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I feel as if they didn't quite justify the length of what we have on there. The second one is that even though, and I'm going to get to this a little bit more in the things that I really love about this record, even though each of these songs are quite lengthy, you got a lot of space for the music to grow and develop. And in that case, I feel as if within the individual songs themselves, there wasn't that justification for the length of these tracks, that didn't have that big payoff in half the tracks. And it just felt like it was kind of wandering the landscape a little bit in terms of the presentation within their music. And that's kind of the end of my criticism. It's just, I feel as if they just needed a really good editor, a really good producer, a really good mixer in that case, just to kind of tighten up some of these tracks and to tighten up the album overall. That all being said, let's talk about what I really loved about this record. I think this is the best record that Kaipa has put out, probably within the past 10 years. This is probably the best. It's got a lot of really, really interesting and really standout moments. Even though it is a very lengthy album and a lot of these tracks do go on for just a little too long, I'm never bored. They're always presenting new ideas. They're always presenting new concepts. They know what works, and they're really playing to that. So we have those stereotypical soundscapes that we have with Kaipa. We have that really big guitar sound with the playing of the keyboards, and I really enjoy those. We have the balance between the female and the male vocals on there, and both trade off very well. I mean, that female vocalist of Alina Gibson, and I believe that's who it is, she still commands such a powerful voice, and it still sounds like it did 20 years ago. And that's incredible to hear just this big standout vocalist still maintain that signature sound, and it doesn't sound as if it aged a day. So that alone, I really need to applaud that. And then we have the two male vocalists, Hans Luden, who's kind of like the main driving force on here, as well as Patrick Lundstrom. Both of them have very good harmonization skills on here. They balance one another very, very well, and one never outshines the other in that case. I also love Per Nielsen on here within the electric and the acoustic guitars. His guitar work on here is quite stellar, and there's a number of passages on here that really stick in my brain and really like call to action in terms of, you know, getting me engaged and getting me like in the moment. So let's talk about some of these individual tracks, and I really enjoy the fact that most of these tracks are within the 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 minute mark. As I mentioned, this really allows the songs to develop and allows the songs to grow. It starts off with the title track and the shortest track at a minute and a half in that case, but really it's Seven Birds that opens it up, and I'm getting flavors of like past classics from them. It's got this power, it's got this drive, and I really love the lyrics on this one. It keeps like, it's one of those like very catchy and very infectious lyrics on there that I really enjoy. Then we come into Like Thousand Dawns, and it really is like that sound of summer, and that's kind of what the whole mythos of this album is. It's the sound of summer, and it's got this really like awe opening to it. And this is something that I love about Kaipa. Like, all of their music is so joyful. It's so optimistic. It presents such a celebration of sound, and that's what's really being captured on here. And I really appreciate that they're able to capture that sound and hold on to it without it being cynical or tongue-in-cheek or in any way like ironic or anything like that. It's like, oh yeah, we're having a good time, but are we? Kind of an idea that I feel like a lot of these types of tracks tend to lean on, especially within the lyrical content, but that's not found here. Revelation View, the fourth track, is one of my favorites on here, and it's kind of funny because it's one of the shorter ones at 9.5 minutes. Yeah, a shorter track that's 9.5 minutes. I like how it starts off with this big punch. You know immediately that you're dealing with a classic, Kaipa song with the sounds, the big oomph on there, and what I love is their ability to build up the sound. You know, it slowly constructs itself after the big explosion of the beginning and really constructs the momentum on there that allows them to really build and really pay off the track by the end. I still wish that there was just like a little bit of an extra oomph. There was a little bit more of like a memorable moment on here to kind of bring everything together. But, it's still a great track. Then we come to, I think, probably the most stereotypical Kaipa song that I've ever really heard. Chased by Wolves and Burned by the Sun. It has everything that a good Kaipa track should have. It's, over the 10-minute mark. We have a lot of the build-ups and the payoffs. We have the weird time signatures that everybody's being able to play around with. That's really utilized in a very catchy and very accessible way. I just wish that there was a little bit more dynamics in this one a little bit. And I wish that it was less of like a jam session and that there was a little bit more kind of structure behind that. And this is definitely found within Spiderweb Train, the longest track at 15.5 minutes. And even though I love this track and I love where it goes, I love the ideas that the bands are putting down on this one, I just wish for 15.5 minutes it went somewhere with a little bit more stay power. And I just felt like they were kind of stopping and going and stopping and going and stopping and going. And I'm like, okay, I want it to do something a little bit more. I want it to really come to a flourishing, and it never quite gets there. Now, the music that it's playing around with is still very accessible, it's very punchy, it's very engaging. I just wish that it kind of went to somewhere new, and this is also found within the penultimate song of Songs in Our Heads, where again, it just kind of continues on, and for 12, almost 13 minutes on this track, it just, I don't know, with these three longer tracks of Chased by Wolves, Spiderweb Train, and Songs in Our Hands, I wish that they just did something more. I wish that maybe they had consolidated these into like one 20-minute track rather than 3, 10, 15-minute tracks. But, I can't criticize it for what it's not, you know? So then we get to a reprise of the title track, and that brings up the album. So in the end, this album was a really good time. And even though the track lengths are a little bit much and the runtime is really much, for a prog record, I think it's very rewarding in that sense. Like, this is a quintessential retro prog album. You know what you're going to get into. You know you're going to have longer stretches of music. You're going to have some wacky time signatures. You're going to have a lot of celebration of music. And I genuinely love this presentation of sound. You know, but you know what you're going to get into. So there's really no surprises. There's really no things that caught me off guard in that case. There was nothing to challenge me. And you don't necessarily need all that within an album. But at this point in my, music reviewing career, I am kind of looking for that. So what I will say is this album was definitely not a disappointment. This one was a pleasant surprise. And as I mentioned, I never found it boring. I never found it lackluster. I always felt engaged in this one. And this is probably, as I mentioned, their best album since 2010. So yeah, I think in the end, I will say Sommargryningsljus, I hope I got that one right, by Kaipa is one that I would absolutely download. There's enough really good music on this one to sink your teeth into and really get into, especially if you're a fan of Kaipa and retro prog as a genre. And if you are a fan of retro prog and you haven't listened to this album or this band, this is a great starting point. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm glad that they're still writing music. And unlike their last 3 records, I'm legitimately excited for whatever Kaipa puts out next. I mean, I always am, but now I'm definitely much more looking forward to that. So yeah, that's what I've got for this album from Kaipa. What did you guys think about this one? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's where I'm going to leave you guys today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.